When Barron Trump walked into a high-end restaurant, he never expected his MAGA hat to trigger a public confrontation. What happened next didn't just shock the manager. It had the entire city talking. It was a bright, sunny afternoon in Los Angeles, the kind that makes you want to slow down and enjoy the moment. Barron Trump, now in his late teens, had just finished a quiet morning of reading and decided to treat himself to lunch. He chose La Raza, a well-known restaurant famous for its mix of sophistication and exclusivity. It was the kind of place where every table had a story: celebrities, CEOs, influencers. He had been there before, always appreciating the calm atmosphere and impeccable service. But this time, as he stepped through the glass doors, Barron stood out, not just because of his tall frame, but because of the bright red MAGA hat resting on his head. He wore it naturally, not as a provocation, but simply as an expression of himself. The hostess, a polished woman in her mid-30s, greeted him warmly and led him to a table in the corner. The restaurant wasn't too busy, just a few diners enjoying their wine, speaking in hushed voices. Barron opened the menu, calmly scanning for his favorite dish. At first, he didn't notice the reactions: the man at the next table nudging his partner, a few waiters whispering by the bar. But then the manager appeared, a man in his mid-40s, dressed sharply, his voice crisp and authoritative. He walked straight to Barron's table, his expression firm with intent. "Excuse me," he said, loud enough to turn heads. "We have a policy against political attire. I'm going to have to ask you to remove your hat." Barron looked up, surprised but not shaken. Taking out his earbuds, he placed them on the table. "I wasn't aware of such a policy," he responded, his voice steady, respectful yet firm. "It's in our code of conduct," the manager insisted, vaguely gesturing toward the entrance. "We want to maintain a neutral space for all guests." Barron tilted his head slightly, considering his options. Around him, some diners pretended not to listen, while others openly stared. Keeping his tone neutral, he said, "I'm not looking for any trouble. I just came for lunch." The manager's posture tensed. "You'll need to remove the hat, or I'll have to ask you to leave." A brief pause. Barron's expression remained unreadable. Then, with a slight nod, he pushed his chair back and stood up. "If that's the rule," he said evenly, "then I'll leave." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence as he gathered his belongings. His glass of water sat untouched. Without another word, he exited the restaurant, the door closing softly behind him. Yet, inside, the tension lingered like an unshaken storm. Outside, Barron stopped for a moment, letting the warm California breeze brush against his face. He adjusted his hat slightly, almost as if reaffirming his decision to wear it. He took a deep breath, not out of anger, but more out of frustration. More than anything, he felt disappointed. He had always been taught to treat people with kindness, even when disagreements happened, and this felt like a betrayal of that belief. Inside the restaurant, a quiet murmur filled the air. A waiter leaned in to whisper to the manager, "Do you think that was the right move?" "That's him." The manager waved him off. "We can't make exceptions. If we let him stay, it sends the wrong message. This is my restaurant, and I'll run it my way." Meanwhile, Barron walked a few blocks down to a small public park. He found an empty bench, sat down, and pulled out his phone. First, he messaged his mother, letting her know what had happened. Then, he texted a few close friends. He wasn't looking for sympathy, just clarity. Had he overreacted? Was the manager justified? Within minutes, replies started coming in. One friend texted, "That's insane. They shouldn't have treated you like that." Another added, "You handled it way better than I would have." As he scrolled through the messages, an idea started forming in his mind. He wasn't looking for revenge or a public scene. Instead, he saw an opportunity, something positive, something meaningful. If the restaurant wanted to avoid political statements, then why not focus on unity and understanding instead? Barron stood up, determination flashing in his eyes. He began making calls, his voice calm but filled with purpose. "Hey, I need your help with something," he said into the phone. It was the first of many conversations that would set his plan in motion. Back at the restaurant, the atmosphere felt uneasy. Word of what had happened started spreading on social media, as diners shared their experiences online. They kicked out Barron Trump over a hat. One post read, alongside a photo of the moment. Another chimed in, "Freedom of expression? Guess not at Larissa." The manager, scrolling through his phone at the bar, felt a knot forming in his stomach. The comment section was already filling up, and not all of it was supportive. "Let them talk," he muttered, trying to shake off the creeping regret. But deep down, he knew the situation was getting out of control. By the time Barron got home, the incident had already begun making waves online. A few local influencers had picked up the story, their captions ranging from supportive to divisive. Barron glanced at the posts, but didn't dwell on them. He wasn't interested in adding to the drama or making the divide worse. Instead, he wanted to turn this negativity into something meaningful. Sitting at his desk, Barron took out a small leather notebook and started jotting down notes. He thought about everything that had happened, not just with the manager but also with the people around him. The silent judgments, the curious stares. What could he do to encourage discussion instead of conflict? He wanted to challenge division, but in a way that felt personal and impactful. Then the idea hit him, almost out of nowhere. A public fundraiser. But not just any fundraiser, one with a clear, unifying message. He envisioned an event to support underprivileged communities, focusing on creating spaces for open conversation and understanding. He picked up his phone and made a call. "Hi, this is Barron Trump. I need some advice on organizing a charity event." "Yes, it's urgent. Can we meet tomorrow?" The person on the other end seemed surprised, but quickly agreed. As the night went on, Barron's plan took shape. He drafted a proposal for the fundraiser, deciding to hold it right outside La Teresa. The location itself would serve as a message that even in places of conflict, unity could take root. A close friend offered to help with logistics, and within hours, the wheels were in motion. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, the fallout was growing more intense. What had started as the manager's decision was no longer just a private matter. It had turned into a public debate. News outlets quickly picked up the story, quoting eyewitness accounts. Some articles portrayed Barron as a victim of intolerance, while others defended the restaurant's right to enforce its policies. The restaurant's social media pages were soon flooded with comments. Some users applauded the manager for standing his ground, but many others called for boycotts, accusing the decision of being hypocritical. One comment read, "So much for a neutral space. Kicking someone out isn't neutral, it's taking a side." The tension inside La Teresa was palpable. Regular customers started canceling their reservations, and what was once a bustling, lively restaurant was now noticeably quieter. The manager, who had initially felt sure of his stance, now found himself second-guessing. He kept telling himself this would all blow over, but deep down he wasn't so sure. As night fell, Barron prepared for what was ahead. He knew the fundraiser wouldn't erase what had happened, but he hoped it could shift the focus toward something more constructive. The world didn't need more shouting matches. It needed real moments of connection, even in the most unexpected places. The next morning, The quiet block in front of Larissa began to change. Trucks arrived, unloading equipment as volunteers set up tables, banners, and a small stage. At the heart of it all, overseeing every detail, stood Barron. A bold banner above the stage read, "United we stand, building bridges, not walls." He had reached out to several organizations focused on youth mentorship, community building, and fostering dialogue. This fundraiser wasn't just about raising money. It was about creating a space where people from all walks of life could come together. Food trucks lined the sidewalk, live music filled the air, and booths representing local charities transformed what had been a place of division into a vibrant, welcoming community event. By midday, the crowd started forming. Families, young professionals, activists, even a few familiar faces from social media, came out to show their support. When Barron stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, the energy in the air was undeniable. His voice was steady but carried deep emotion. "Yesterday, I was asked to leave this restaurant because of a hat. And you know what? That's okay. I respect their policies, even if I don't agree with them. But what struck me wasn't just being turned away. It was the bigger picture. We've become so quick to judge, so quick to pick sides, so quick to shut down conversations. That's not who we are. We can do better." The crowd erupted into applause as Barron continued, "This event isn't about me, and it's not about them. It's about all of us, about finding ways to listen, to understand, and to come together. The funds we raise today will go toward programs that foster dialogue and inclusion. Thank you all for being here and proving that unity will always be stronger than division." This time, the applause was even louder as Barron stepped off the stage, moving through the crowd, shaking hands, and personally thanking attendees. His calm presence and thoughtful words had struck a chord with those who showed up. Many had come out of curiosity, but they were leaving with a sense of inspiration. Inside Larissa, however, the atmosphere was completely different. The manager stood by the window, watching the event unfold outside. He hadn't expected Barron to respond in this way, and now he found himself feeling conflicted. Some of his own staff had even stepped outside, drawn in by the lively music and the overwhelming sense of unity. A waiter, who had witnessed everything the day before, returned to the bar, lowering his voice as he spoke. "You should go out there. Talk to him." The manager stiffened. "This isn't my fight." "Maybe not," the waiter replied, "but it's definitely your chance." The manager didn't answer, but something in his expression shifted. He poured himself a glass of water, his eyes locked on the growing crowd outside. Something about the scene tugged at him, a feeling he had been pushing away until now. As the day unfolded, the fundraiser outside Larissa became the talk of the town. Social media exploded with live streams, photos, and hashtags like #BuildingBridges and #UnitedWeStand, all praising Barron's composure and the powerful message he was spreading. But it wasn't just locals taking notice. News crews arrived, capturing the electric energy of the event, Barron's speeches echoing through their broadcasts. Inside the restaurant, though, the scene was starkly different. The once busy dining room felt eerily quiet. Tables that were usually booked weeks in advance now sat empty. The few customers who did come in seemed distracted, stealing glances toward the windows as if sensing they were missing out on something bigger than a meal. The manager tried to keep his focus on running the restaurant, but the shift in energy among his staff was impossible to ignore. Eventually, a server approached him hesitantly. "Some customers have been asking about the event. They're saying it looks incredible. Maybe we should go out there." The manager's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and retreated to his office, shutting the door behind him. Sitting at his desk, he stared at his computer screen. Dozens of emails flooded his inbox. complaints from customers, cancelled reservations, even a few harsh critiques from local media. But one email stood out. It was from a regular customer, someone who had always been supportive. The message read, "I've always been a fan of Larissa, but what happened yesterday was truly disappointing. Removing someone because of their personal beliefs? That's not neutrality. It's divisive. I hope you find a way to make this right." The words hit harder than the manager expected. Leaning back in his chair, he ran a hand through his hair. Had I been wrong? Was his decision really about neutrality, or was there something deeper, something he hadn't wanted to admit to himself? Meanwhile, outside, the event was in full swing. A local jazz band filled the air with rhythm. Children giggled as they painted murals at an art booth, and donation boxes overflowed with contributions. Barron was everywhere, shaking hands, listening to people's stories, even pausing to take selfies. But his confidence wasn't arrogant or for show. It was real. The kind of composure that comes from knowing you're doing something that truly matters. As the sun dipped lower, bathing the scene in a golden glow, a sudden shift ran through the crowd. People turned toward the restaurant's entrance. The manager had just stepped outside. He hesitated for a moment at the top of the steps, adjusting his tie, exhaling deeply. Then, with a steadying breath, he began walking toward Barron. The crowd instinctively parted, their voices lowering as they watched the two men close the distance. Barron noticed him right away. He didn't flinch. He didn't step back. Instead, he offered a polite, knowing smile, and extended his hand. The manager hesitated for just a second before accepting the handshake. "I'd like to talk," he said quietly, his voice barely cutting through the hum of the event. Barron nodded, motioning toward a quieter spot at the edge of the gathering. The two walked together, while the crowd, though watching closely, respected their space. Stopping near the outskirts of the event, where the music and voices blended into a softer backdrop, the manager took a breath. His usual commanding presence had softened, uncertainty flickering in his expression. He glanced over his shoulder at the crowd, then back at Barron. "I need to start by saying, I didn't handle yesterday well," he admitted, his voice low. "I thought I was doing what was best for my restaurant, my staff. But now I see, I made a mistake." He exhaled slowly. "I judged you. And I acted out of fear, not fairness." Barron listened closely, his expression steady yet encouraging. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong," he said after a pause. "Thank you for saying that." The manager exhaled, as if a weight had just been lifted off his shoulders. "Watching what you've done today. It's humbling," he admitted. "You could have retaliated, turned this into an attack on my business, but instead, you created something positive. Not many people would have done that." Barron gave a faint smile. "I don't think the world needs more anger or division," he replied. "Yesterday could have just added to the noise. But I wanted to show there's a better way." The manager nodded slowly. "You did," he said, "and I'd like to support what you're doing. If there's any way for me, or the restaurant, to contribute, I'd be happy to." Barron thought for a moment before responding. "I think the best way to contribute is to reflect on how we treat each other. Policies matter, but they should never come at the cost of kindness and understanding. Maybe La Teresa could host an event like this, something that brings people together, instead of driving them apart." The manager blinked, clearly caught off guard by the suggestion. But then, a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I think that's a great idea," he said. "Let's make it happen." They shook hands again, this time with genuine warmth. The crowd, sensing the resolution, broke into applause. But it wasn't just polite clapping. It was real. It was heartfelt. Everyone understood the significance of what had just happened. As the event neared its end, Barron stepped onto the stage one last time. He looked over the crowd, a deep gratitude in his eyes. "We all make mistakes," he began. "What matters is how we grow from them." Today wasn't just about raising money. It was about proving that even when we disagree, we can still find common ground. Thank you for showing that unity isn't just possible. It's necessary. The crowd erupted in cheers, their energy filling the air with hope. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Barron stood with his friends and family, watching the last of the attendees leave, carrying with them not just memories, but a message. A reminder. Conflicts, big or small, don't have to end in bitterness. They don't have to divide us. By choosing grace, understanding, and proactive solutions, even the hardest moments can become opportunities for connection and growth.